before anyone had found a single ransom note at all. Before anyone knew Nancy Guthrie was missing, a masked figure was already standing at her door in the dark, disabling the one camera built to catch exactly this. That happened in the early hours of February 1st. But months later, when reporters asked the FBI directly whether the ransom notes in this case were real, the FBI told Reuters none of them are. Yet CBS News, NBC News, and News Nation have each separately reported that investigators privately believe at least one of those notes, the one that says Nancy is dead, buried with nature now, actually came from the person who took her. So which is true? Is the FBI protecting a real investigation by calling a real note fake in public? Or is the note itself shakier than 3 networks are making it sound? By the end of this, you'll know exactly what that note says, who traced it, and why the FBI's own public statement doesn't match what people inside this case are telling reporters. And along the way, you'll learn one detail about Nancy herself that almost nobody has mentioned. The very ordinary Sunday morning habit that's the actual reason anyone noticed she was gone, before anyone had found a single ransom note at all. Here's where you're watching from. Drop it below, because this case has pulled people in from everywhere. That Sunday habit is the place to actually start. Every week, Nancy walked next door. She and a neighbor watched an online church service together. It was small, it was routine. It was the kind of thing nobody thinks to mention, until it's the reason anyone noticed anything was wrong. On January 31st, a family member dropped her off at her Catalina Foothills home around 9:45 that night. That's the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie alive. The next morning, she didn't show up. No call, no message, nothing. Relatives went to check. At 11:56 a.m., they found her gone. The Pima County Sheriff's Office would later confirm what they found: blood near the front entrance, a back door left unlocked, and a doorbell camera, the exact system installed to catch a moment like this, deliberately disabled. If you were the one reviewing that footage for the first time, what would stop you cold? The footage itself came from the FBI, and what it showed was specific: a masked individual, gloves, a black Ozark trail hiker backpack, the kind you'd find on a shelf at any outdoor store, average build, roughly 5'9", and this detail is the one worth sitting with: branches, placed deliberately in front of the lens, not torn, not smashed, arranged. That's not panic. That's someone who thought about the camera before he ever touched it. We'll be honest, the thing that unsettles us most isn't the mask. It's how domestic that gesture looks. Someone stood at a stranger's door in the dark and tidied a lens like it was a chore. Investigators tried something else, too. They used specialized equipment, attempting to pick up a Bluetooth signal from Nancy's pacemaker, hoping it might lead them somewhere. It didn't. What they do know is the timing. The camera went dark. 41 minutes later, her pacemaker signal stopped completely. At 2:28 in the morning, in a quiet house, with nobody watching, that signal just ended. Here's what should unsettle you about the footage the FBI released in February. There's no timestamp on it, none. The sheriff's office has said publicly that any theory claiming 2 separate visits, 2 different days, is purely speculative, because the images themselves don't confirm a sequence. Investigators who caught a fake ransom sender in under 24 hours, using nothing but a Google account, still can't tell you with certainty how many times this person came to that door. So here's what this chapter actually settles. The camera was disabled. Nancy was taken from her own home sometime in those early morning hours. Her pacemaker went dark 41 minutes later, a timeline the FBI itself has confirmed, not speculation. But confirming that timeline is one thing. Confirming what happened inside it, and whether a note that later claimed her death is telling the truth about those minutes, is a very different question. And that's exactly where the FBI's public story stops matching what people inside this case are saying. That's the timeline. Now here's the note that claims to explain how it ended, and the reason the FBI won't say, on the record, whether they believe it. The first note showed up fast. On February 2nd, one day after Nancy's disappearance became public, Someone submitted a message through Cold's online tip portal, a Tucson newsroom's ordinary story idea inbox, not built for anything like this. It said Nancy was alive. It demanded cryptocurrency for her release. Investigators treated it as potentially credible from the start. 4 days later, a second note arrived. Same portal, different IP address. But Cold News Director Jessica Bobadilla confirmed something crucial. The sender used the same type of secure server both times. Same infrastructure, rotating exposure. That's not someone hiding once out of fear. That's someone maintaining a method. And the second note said something the first one never did. It said Nancy had died. It said her death wasn't intentional. And it said she was buried with nature now. NBC News, citing 3 sources familiar with the matter, reported that investigators have assessed that note's contents as potentially credible, not dismissed within hours, the way most of the fakes were. Which makes the next part harder to square. The FBI told Reuters, on the record, that none of the ransom notes in this case are believed to be genuine. That's the official line. That's what got published under the agency's name. But that's not the whole story. On June 22nd, CBS News reported that investigators familiar with the case believe those 2 notes likely came from the person or persons who actually abducted Nancy. Not an imposter, not someone inserting themselves for attention. Airmail added that the note contained specific details about the night she disappeared, details precise enough to separate it from every hoax that got cleared within hours. So which is it? The official line or the working theory behind it? We should be fair here, because not everyone agrees. Former FBI agent Michael Harrigan told News Nation it's hard to confirm this note's legitimacy, for one specific reason. It never says where the body is. That's a real gap. CBS's likely credible assessment doesn't erase it. Hold 2 things at once for a second. Sheriff Chris Nanos has said publicly that some information in this case has been withheld, not to keep secrets for their own sake, but, in his words, to protect the case itself. And retired FBI agent Jason Pack has said a family with the Guthrie's resources almost certainly has people looking into this independently, and that the FBI's own Victim Services Unit shares what it can, when it can. Put that together, and here's where it lands. What's no longer in dispute is this. 2 notes reached a Tucson newsroom in early February, routed through matching secure infrastructure, separated only by a changed IP address. And investigators capable of unmasking a hoax in 24 hours now believe those notes carry the account of someone who was actually there. Imposter or authentic account is no longer the open question inside this investigation. Whatever the public was told, that detail should not matter. But it does. Because Nancy Guthrie was a woman who kept her Sundays, who chose company and faith over sitting alone, even at 84. It tells you exactly who was taken. Here's the harder question. Was the FBI right to call a note fake in public if they'd privately assessed it as credible? Or does managing the story that way risk burying information the public could have actually used? You tell us. But knowing where the notes came from isn't the same as knowing who sent them. And someone disciplined enough to route 2 messages through matching secure servers without ever touching a personal account is about to look a lot more calculated than anyone the FBI has caught so far. Drop where you're watching from if you haven't already. It genuinely helps this reach the people still asking questions about this case. So if this really is the person who took her, what does someone with that kind of discipline actually look like on paper? And just as important, who was Nancy Guthrie to someone capable of doing this to her? Start with who she was, because it matters here. Her grandchildren call her Noni, the name her own daughter used, publicly, in a Mother's Day tribute months into this. She depended completely on a pacemaker and daily heart medication just to stay alive. Her family didn't need investigators to point that out. They said it themselves, out loud, in their very first public appeal. Now look at what the evidence actually shows about whoever did this. On one side, someone who left no personal device, no traceable account, no digital footprint resembling the man caught in California within 24 hours. That takes planning, On the other side, this same person still chose to approach a monitored front door in person and still chose to communicate, twice, with a media outlet, when silence would have been safer. So how does someone with that exact mix of discipline and exposure actually operate? The FBI itself may have treated that question as urgent. FBI Director Kash Patel personally released the surveillance photos on February 10th. An unusual step, one that signals how significant this piece of evidence was considered internally. And here's the detail that should stop you. Those photos carry no timestamp, none. A modern surveillance system releasing a modern image with no timeline attached to it at all, which means even the sheriff's office can't confirm something the public has treated as settled for months, whether this was one visit or two. One more piece matters here, and it's the one that reframes everything. Jason Pack said the Guthrie family almost certainly has people looking into this on their own. Sheriff Nanos has said outright that some information has been withheld, his words, to protect the case. Put together, that suggests investigators and the family may have understood this actor's profile for months, without ever saying so publicly. If any of this bothers you, that the people closest to this case may already know more than the rest of us do, that's worth doing something with. Like this video so it keeps reaching people following this case. Share it with someone who's been asking what actually happened to Nancy Guthrie. There's one more piece of this story that has nothing to do with servers, surveillance photos, or secure infrastructure, and it might be the part of this case that matters most. It's quiet where Nancy lived now. 100 days after she disappeared, the only thing still standing outside her house is a small memorial. No cameras, no crowds, just that. The desert washes nearby, once combed by hand by volunteers for weeks, sit empty. Whatever they hold, they haven't given it up yet. We should say plainly what's still unknown, because it's a lot. Even with more than 150 agents assigned and months of DNA analysis underway, investigators have never said they're close to an answer, only that the case stays open. And that brings us back to that Sunday habit, the one detail in this entire case that isn't about servers or surveillance footage at all. The routine Nancy Guthrie kept every single week, walking next door, choosing company over sitting alone, put her on a schedule, a predictable one. If this wasn't random, whoever did this may have known that Sunday morning was coming, and that's a thread investigators can still pull. It's a Sunday morning, next door. A neighbor is already expecting her. The porch light by Nancy's door stays off. The chair usually pulled up beside the screen sits empty. Nobody walks over that week, or any week after. She never made it back. You've been sitting with this for a while now, and if it feels heavier than most cases you've watched, that's not in your head. If this case has stuck with you the way it's stuck with us, like this video so it keeps reaching people who might know something. Share it with anyone still asking what actually happened to Nancy Guthrie, and subscribe to Casebreak Network, because we're not moving on from this one. We're breaking cases, and we're following every lead until this one has an answer. The FBI told one story in public. Whatever it actually believes has stayed inside that building for 5 months. Nancy Guthrie, the masked individual on that doorbell footage, the note that says buried with nature, none of it has a name attached yet. And an agency that can catch a hoax in a day is still the same agency that hasn't told the public what it knows. If you had to guess right now, is the FBI still chasing this note, or has it already led them somewhere they haven't told us about? Say it in the comments.